Ministers present, Principal Secretaries present, Your Excellencies Governors, Members of Parliament, Senators, the membership of the County Assembly of Nakuru, distinguished participants and delegates, good afternoon. Last week, at the launch of the second session of the UN Habitat Assembly, and Madam Maimuna has spoken to it, I participated in a forum that reflected at great length on the urgency, challenges, and opportunities in connection with sustainable urbanization. I am encouraged by the number of highly engaged major stakeholders in the area of human settlement and especially urbanization that I have been able to engage with before and even today. Clearly, urbanization is a defining trend of the next phase of socioeconomic development, is a matter that should occupy us immensely because sustainable solutions are urgently needed to enable our countries govern effectively and serve efficiently. Urbanization is a general human trend at all times. However, rural poverty, underemployment is driving increasing numbers of people to urban areas in search of opportunities. In our part of the world, urban centers have historically developed only limited capacity and cannot serve large populations adequately. Even before the current tide of runaway urbanization got underway, our urban authorities were already struggling to provide for comparatively modest populations. At independence, for example, Kenya was a rural nation of 9 million people. Only 8% of this population was urban. Now, Kenya is urbanizing at the annual rate of approximately 5%, one of the highest in the world. 34% of our population today live in urban centers. And by 2050, 50% of all Kenyans will be living in urban settlements. That is phenomenal. It is a challenge, but it is also an opportunity if we work smart with the interventions that we have. Rapid urbanization coupled with low growth of essential housing, water, energy, transport, sanitation, and other infrastructure has intensified demand, leading to such manifestations of unbearable pressure as unplanned and unsafe developments, poor sanitation and hazardous pollution, crowded and unsanitary housing, and poor access to other goods like education, healthcare, and security have hugely expanded. The unprecedented growth of our urban areas is therefore of unplanned, uncontrolled, and unsustainable type. Over 50% of urban residents inhabit informal settlements. Statistics from the government of Kenya show that we have 1,411 informal settlements, slums, in our country, with close to 7 million people living in those informal settlements. We have negative implications on human dignity, security, safety, and health because of these informal settlements. As a result, our commitment to sustainable development goals is undermined, most of all SDG number 11, by what is the trends that we see. It is time to take radical measures to bring our urbanization under control in order to enable urban institutions and authorities to significantly improve livability in these settlements and in our country. Urban areas must be transformed from spaces where it is difficult for authorities to provide services for citizens to obtain them. In other words, we must, with great urgency, steward the transformation of our urban areas into well-planned, adequately managed, well-governed, and sufficiently resourced areas. The future, as has been said by everybody here, is urban. We cannot and must not argue with this inevitability. Our role is concerned with how, rather than whether, future urbanization will unfold. Our primary mandate is to facilitate an expeditious transition to Kenya's desired urban future. As a starting point, the Constitution provides a robust institutional foundation for sustainable urbanization by mandating national legislation to provide for the governance and management of urban areas and cities under Article 184. The legal framework governing urbanization and urban governance is also in place in the form of the Urban Areas and Cities Act, Cap 275, upon which a city like Nakuru was pronounced as a city, and the policy framework set out by Sessional Paper Number 1 of 2016 on national urban development. So we have the constitutional, we have the legal, we have the institutional, we have the policy framework that will assist us manage this necessity and this imperative of urbanization. The primary barrier to the implementation of our urban governance and management framework lies in the need to harmonize it with the County Government Act, as well as the Physical and Land Use Planning Act, together with a review of the urban development policy. All those have to be brought in line and to speak together and to synergize so that national legislation, county legislation, the County Government Act speak to the same thing, because urbanization is with us for the present and for the future. There is no reason for further delay in undertaking this harmonization. And the Minister and the Council of Governors need to interrogate the areas that need to be harmonized so that we can, with a sense of urgency, be able to do what we have to do. The advent of devolution has greatly accelerated urbanization in our country. County governments and the location of the county headquarters are significant catalysts of urbanization. Counties, therefore, have an important role to play in promoting orderly management of urbanization. I listened to Susan, the governor of Nakuru, tell us what she's doing about setting up urban areas in many places, including one in a place called Mwisho wa Lami. I thought, Susan, we already did something about the Mwisho of Lami. There is no more Mwisho ya Lami. I thought we connected the Lami all the way to Nakuru. So I suggest that as you transform that particular township into an urban area, I suggest you give it a different name. In economic development terms, urbanization is a tremendous factor. Towns and cities are important economic nodes, contributing significantly to the national GDP. Nairobi alone, for example, accounts for 21% of Kenya's GDP. On the other hand, towns and cities are major consumers of resources and drivers of environmental degradation, leading to climate change. Demand in towns and cities can distort the supply chains of important goods, affecting prices and dictating the cost of living. Environmental malpractices like the discharge of untreated effluent and poor disposal of solid waste pose serious risks, while toxic pearls of smoke from industries often engulf megacities. We must take all these possibilities into account as we ponder the next course of urbanization during deliberations in this forum. And I encourage you, being representatives from across the divide, from national government, from our counties, to interrogate how we can work together so that we don't end up with a situation like the way we have today, For example, in Nairobi City, we are grappling with what to do with the Nairobi rivers because of the kind of sludge and sewage that has been pumped into those cities. The Kenyan Urban Forum assembles stakeholders and strategic partners into a coalition that collaboratively and innovatively tackles the most salient issues and fundamental dimensions of the urbanization phenomenon with a view to generating sustainable mechanisms for transition from hazardous urbanization to livable towns and cities. It is important to appreciate all of them for their goodwill, commitment, and solidarity. Your support inspires us to do even better, and we do not take it for granted. Our urban development agenda has benefited from partnerships and collaborations with the World Bank, French Development Agency, Swedish International Development Agency, and UN Habitat, among many partners who work with us on this very important agenda around our cities and how to improve the availability of services and goods in our towns. The World Bank's support for the Kenya Urban Support Program, now coming to an end, has contributed significantly to the development of urban institutions. Consequently, 70 municipalities have been established, while more are being set up by county governments. We look forward to further engagement with our partners with a view to extending the partnership to enable Kenya establish functional, efficient, and sustainable urban institutions. Although much commendable progress has been accomplished in promoting sustainable urban development in the country, much more remains to be done to maximize urban livability. I am persuaded that a dedicated urban development fund is a vital vehicle to navigate Kenya's transition to a desirable urban future. I know Governor Orengo, reading the statement of the Council of Governors, spoke to this issue. It is time to bring the National Urban Development Policy 2016 into operation to facilitate the creation of this fund. And I undertake that the government of Kenya is going to do it and ensure that we create the necessary partnership with the counties so that we can, in a collaborative manner, be able to deliver on this fund. And similarly, I urge county governments to do their part by devising innovative approaches for generating revenues to finance urban development. And we are ready to assist county governments in doing this. We have integrated affordable housing as a critical pillar of our national bottom-up economic transformation agenda, not only to deal with affordable housing supply gaps, but also as a means of creating employment for millions of our citizens. For the sustainable urbanization imperative to materialize, it must translate into an affordable housing program at its core. And I think I have spoken to this issue severally, and I want to repeat that as we work on the housing program, we've committed ourselves that we are going to roll out the construction of 250,000 houses every year. It is not just about houses. Yes, the houses are important because 7 million of our citizens today live in slums. We owe it to them, to their dignity, and to the well-being of our citizenry, and to the future generations. All our children will be in cities. I hear some people say, how is building a house in the city going to help me? I am living in some rural place. They forget that the people who will be living in those cities will either be their children or their grandchildren, and they have a choice whether these children will be going to live in slums or they will be living in some decent housing units. And apart from sorting out the housing question, it is the whole exercise of creating jobs. How do we increase manufacturing as a percentage of our GDP? How do we make our cement factories to work? How do we make our steel factories to work? How do we engage in ensuring that all our construction products factories are working? How do we ensure that our engineers, our quantity surveyors, our electricians, our masons, our carpenters, our electricians, how do we get this huge body of human capital working? We are generating close to 500,000 people every year from our TVETs. We are generating close to 800,000 young people into the labor market every year. It should concern us as citizens. How are these people going to be meaningfully engaged? We are spending, as I said earlier, we are spending $5 billion, 650 billion Kenya shillings every year in the education of our citizens, from primary school to university. What is our plan to ensure that the output of this great investment contributes to the development of our country? How do we ensure that the women and men who get out of this channel of education, training, and acquisition of knowledge are meaningfully engaged? We have to responsibly think about it. You have convened for the purpose of rigorously engaging views in order to form a fuller appreciation of the state of our urban affairs and then develop strategic pathways towards inclusive and sustainable urbanization. I urge you to use this important opportunity to develop a robust roadmap that will guide our overdue transition to sustainable urban futures. I wish all delegates fruitful deliberations and convey the government's commitment to our shared agenda. I want to thank all our partners for working with us in this very important space, and I look forward with great anticipation to receiving a report of your proceedings on how we are going to manage urbanization into the future. The Kenyan Urban Forum, the first in the Republic of Kenya, is now officially open. Thank you very much, and God bless you.